You're listening to Short Inspirations from Ralph. Treasure Hunt, Part 2. In this series we're looking at those two parables in Matthew 13 where the kingdom of heaven was likened to treasure hidden in a field, or the kingdom of heaven was like someone looking for fine pearls, and when he found one of great value he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. And that's the theme for both of these parables, that they sold up everything to get what they thought was of great value. And the thing about these two parables are that they are not really about money or pearls or treasure. They are actually spiritual stories dressed in ways that we can understand what he's saying. They're stories about a much deeper principle than everyday things in our natural world. So it's about things that money just cannot buy. And we looked in the last episode at the futility of going after money in this world, the things that seem to glitter like gold, but in the end, after perhaps a temporary and shallow happiness, can bring heartache. So Jesus here is talking about the kingdom of heaven, or God actually, but he's writing to the Jews. This is Matthew, who didn't like the name God used commonly. It was too precious. And in the Middle East, it was a very common thing for someone, a rich man, to bury treasure in the ground with the intent on digging it up again one day. However, he might die or even forget where he put it, and it remains buried until a peasant or someone else finds it while ploughing the soil. Could be a strong box. And then he sells everything he has. If it was in this day in which we lived, it would be trade me, garage sales, cash converters, hawking stuff off to friends at stalls at markets. You name it. The person is desperate for this treasure, almost obsessed. Then he actually buys the whole field. He probably pays too much, but it doesn't matter, because once he owns the land, whatever is on it is legally his. He becomes a rich man overnight. If you and I had a metal detector back then, we might make a fortune. So what Jesus is talking about here is a spiritual kingdom, but much more than that, a kingdom that's eternal. And when push comes to shove, it's worth leaving everything else that we can value for this one thing. And one thing's for sure, this spiritual treasure is worth giving up everything for. It's worth living for, it's worth dying for. Jesus said, for whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. That's in Matthew 16:25. And then he goes on to say, what good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world, yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? Now, note that we're not saying here that we need to be poor or that God doesn't provide for us. He does. But it's just that those things are temporary and they fail and should never be the number one priority. So this pearl of great price, this treasure at its core, answers the question, what happens when it's my turn to leave this life? You see, this is of eternal value. It can't be compared. And I remember taking the funeral of an 18-year-old young woman who couldn't get a heart-lung transplant in time, and she passed away. But on her computer they found these words, all of life is preparation for eternity. The second thing is that this spiritual treasure cannot be manufactured by human hands. It's amazing the lengths that people will go to try and prevent old age and try and defeat death. I mean, cryonics has been on the news in recent times. That's basically freezing your body in the hope that sometime in the future that person can be revived. And so there are serious limitations to what man can do when it comes to matters of the kingdom of God. In fact, man can do or build lots of things, but cannot build anything of eternal value. We know that knowledge is accelerating, and we see that with artificial intelligence. And it really is doubling, apparently, every few weeks now. And it's a tribute to the giftedness of a man, the talent, the things that man can do with their intellectual capacity. And the ability of man is astounding, to create, to engineer, to reason, to make, to unravel DNA, to split the atom, to walk on the moon, to operate on the heart or the brain. All this is done through the ability of man, but they cannot give life, and they cannot create an eternal pearl of price. God bless you.